Wow, it's not going live. It's taking its time.
It
Wow,
is
come
saying
on.
it is live.
All right, I guess so, but it's not live on IG, and that's usually the thing that's the indicator. But all right, we'll just
Okay.
trust it that we're live.
Okay.
And we'll go live on TikTok. All right, brilliant. Yeah, I wonder why IG is so tardy now. What's going on with you? Oh. All right, anyway, we're live then, Beena. We're live. Do you see
Okay.
it live
Hello
on
and
Facebook?
welcome to. Yes. Okay. I don't see that, but hello and welcome to Moreness-Culture. I assume that we are live. Although yes, I can see. I can see somehow. Okay. Anyway,
Yeah, just
good morning.
IG for whatever reason is not. So
Okay. Good
I
morning,
wonder
sir.
why.
Good morning, Rain. Good morning, everyone who is going to join us live,
Good,
and of
good.
course on
Oh, I know
Facebook.
why. It's not.
Okay. On Instagram, TikTok, and on, of course, YouTube. And also, good mornings to everyone who is going to watch us recorded because we do see some, okay, for us, a lot of views on our videos. People do watch that. But, okay, somehow still we are not getting some feedback from that, which is rather very interesting for me. Anyway, you, whoever is watching us, all are most welcome to join us in the Moreness culture we are trying to share with everyone. This is the space that has created for us where we can be, of course, not only ourselves, but also we can be more. Here we can find an idea of how we can be more than who we are right now and what our expectations. Mostly we do have very limited expectations from ourselves and we don't realize that because it is beyond our understanding that it can be, life can be, myself can be more than what I just assume. And we assume things because of, and as we have assumptions because of our experiences, because of the cueing, because of the character we have so far built. Like as good, earnest good people, they have, sorry to say, but okay, mostly they have kind of a dishonest self-perception because out of their goodness, they don't.
Yes, yes. Sadly so. Sadly so.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
They don't actually acknowledge that how much they are actually imprecise. Out of their goodness, out of their humility, out of
For how
their
much they
respect,
could be if they chose that path.
exactly. And out of their fear of ego and getting involved in ego, they always try to keep it very limited. Okay, it is a good idea
Yeah.
to keep it a bit lower than what you are or your potential, reaching your maximum always is very energy consuming for me. So, and also that, okay, it doesn't give you any fear if you are just keeping a bit low note than what you can actually. But there is a big, huge difference between being dishonest, completely dishonest, and saying that, oh, I cannot do this, I'm not that, out of humility, which we don't realize that it's a flat lie. This is what we do because
Yeah.
if it is about something else or someone else, we will be honest with them that, okay, yes, these are your potential, this is what you can do, this is your range, and this thing can do. When it comes to ourselves, out of humility, we get into this subtle superiority paradigm. Oh, I'm not going to this, I'm that good, I'm not going to claim that. So all sort of nonsense involved into this thing that we don't get the clarity about self-honesty. Self-honesty is the biggest, huge thing in our life because if I'm not going to be honest with myself, who else going to be? And how my perception of others and my ideas and my perspective about others and other things and also about universe would be credible if I'm not an honest person because I'm not self-honest. So we lose our
Yeah.
credibility, we lose the value, and we do actually lose value, a lot of value which we can acquire, we can extract because of false humility, which we assume it's a very good gesture from our side because of assumptions. But self honesty, I'm really sorry. to say that I'm guilty of it, that it's a very fine balance we need. And this is very daring to be self-honest, not only about our negative things, not only about our shortcomings, but also about our potential, also about our values, our character. We have to just take it, detach ourselves from that, oh, this is my thing, so I should not say this. It's an old thought, it's an old way of thinking. We have to be detached from our personal agendas and actually measure ourselves, gauge ourselves accurately and precisely, as someone else might do that. And this is the key to see our potential. Because if I can achieve this thing, if I can do something, if I can understand this, if I can be aware of something right now, I can do it in the future also. So this is what the biggest, huge deal to think about self-honesty. And this is the base of, Syl has created a like really a magic mantra that, oh, what I'm doing here, what I'm doing right now, what I'm doing. Catching
What am I
ourselves.
doing? What
What
am
am
I
I
doing?
doing?
What am I
Okay,
doing?
just
Yes.
changing my grammar. What am I doing? See that this just asking this thing works like mantra, because if I'm aware of my intent, how can I not be self-honest? There is no chance. I
Right.
cannot
And
be.
that's a capital D doing.
Exactly.
What am I
Exactly.
doing? Not what doing in my life, in my spirit, in my overall. What am I doing?
Asking this question, of course, it is going
Right,
to bring
Beena?
your attention. Exactly. Asking this question not only bring attention to what you are actually doing physically in this world right now, how you are existing, but also about your intent. Automatically, you will start understanding your
Yeah.
intent. And once you will understand your intent, then you cannot be anything other than be self-honest. It's a mechanism, it's a mantra. It's a magic word right here. We can use it to be more self-honest in our life. And self-honesty really, because once I'm self-honest, I can be aware of what I really want in life. Mostly, we don't have clarity. Of course, I'm not saying it like I'm not trying to generalize it, but mostly we don't have clarity what we really want in life when we don't have self-honesty. Once you are self-honest, then you will not get inspired or get affected by the ambition mindset, superiority paradigm, and all of the nonsense. And you will see your true self. This is what self-honesty is.
Yeah.
It's a big, huge deal. Thank you so much, Syl, for being patient with me. I was just sharing this, and now we are going to start our readings, and Syl will be done with all these things. So what we are doing here,
Oh,
we are
yeah,
doing,
I'm done.
we are busy with capital R reading of Carlos Castaneda's books about Don Juan, with a very
Yeah.
specific intent to connect with Don. We want to connect with his intent of sharing, capital S sharing, and also
Yeah.
we want to connect with how he was being, even being a big, like, okay, for Carlos being the, what is the word they use for themselves? Uh,
Oh,
he
you
was a
mean?
guide, a spiritual guide in his life, but he himself was very receptive towards new things. And that is a magic.
Oh,
That is a magic of self-honesty. He is very open. So we have intent.
oh,
We
yeah.
are doing this capital R reading, which is a term for our way of impeccability, to go beyond what has been just said in words, to
Yeah.
go and
Yeah.
connect with the intent, to read and understand between the lines, and of course go more than that, just to connect with the energy, with the intent. So we are
Yeah.
busy with, and also that still with a very specific intent to connect on. This is what we are busy with now. And you, Syl, is going
Right.
to read because my network is still not very okay. It is getting better anyway, but I will see. So, Syl, you just start and I will join you. It is getting
All right.
better,
So
but
we still on the way Carlos is thinking about and connecting to controlled folly. And Don Juan has shared very profound point about controlled folly. Essentially, for Don Juan, that nothing is more important than anything else. But so whatever you do, it doesn't really matter. It's folly. But the key is to be in charge of your folly, and not your folly to be in charge of you. which is what it normally is, right? So very, very big deal. Hello, all the TikTokers. Great to see you here. Very cool, very cool. And please leave comments, ask questions, right? This is interactive, so I'm very keen for that. All right, so we're continuing to read. And this is Don Juan saying, "You have been away too long. You think too much." He got up and walked into the thick chaparral at the side of the house. I fed the fire to keep the pot boiling. I was going to light a kerosene lantern, but the semi-darkness was very soothing. The fire from the stove, which supplied enough light to light, also created a reddish glow all around me. I put my notes on the ground and lay down. I felt tired. Out of the whole conversation with Don Juan, the only poignant thing on my mind was that he did not care about me. It disturbed me immensely. Carlos is very insecure, so of course it's going to affect him. Over a period of years, I had put my trust in him. Had I not had complete confidence in him, I would have been paralyzed with fear at the prospect of learning his knowledge. Why? Why? Why, Carlos? Why is this an automatic assumption? There's nothing inherently that suggests his knowledge is something to fear. It's amazing. The premise on which I had based my trust was the idea that he cared for me personally, cared about me personally. Actually, I had always been afraid of him, but I had kept my fear in check because I trusted him. When he removed that basis, I had nothing to fall back on, and I felt helpless. What messed up psychology, right, Beena? Insecurity. Don't be insecure, people, because this is what happens. There's no actual objective necessity for this thinking and this feeling. None. And and yet Carlos has it. And he trusts his own thinking, his own feelings, his own assumptions, his own hierarchy of motivations. He trusts this. It's based on absolutely nothing. Just he's assimilated this from culture. Yeah, really sad. A very strange anxiety possessed me. I became extremely agitated and began pacing up and down in front of the stove. Don Juan was taking a long time. I waited for him impatiently. He returned a while later. He sat down again in front of the fire, and I blurted out my fears. I told him that I worried because I was incapable of changing directions in midstream. I explained to him that together with the trust I had in him, I had also learned to respect and to regard his way of life as being intrinsically more rational, or at least more functional than mine. And yet, right, what you just said there, Carlos, means absolutely nothing. You don't actually trust it as being more rational or more functional. If you had, then you would trust in the way of life. Whether Don Juan likes you or not is irrelevant. Or at least, shift that to make that your primary focus. Your primary focus is on being liked, and your self-importance is what's the issue. Right? He does trust this way of life, but he's not making it the primary motivation. And therefore, you see, the primary one of not being liked is now, doesn't affect that because it's lower in the hierarchy. Hierarchy of motivations is very, very critical. Hierarchy of motivations is a Moreness conception. Beena, I don't have that in my dictionary of power. I'm about to add it in there just to, when we remember these things, you got to do it right away. I don't know why I didn't add it in there. You know, got to do it right away, right, Beena?
Yes.
Beena? Oh, you are
Yes.
there.
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
Hierarchy of motivations. Yeah, it's an old idea for me. Just I never expressed it in that particular nice way before, and so
Yes.
it's a big deal. It's a big deal. It's a big deal.
Yes.
All right. All right. So uh, I had also learned to respect and regard his way of life as being intrinsically more rational, or at least more functional than mine. I said that his words had plunged me into a terrible conflict because they entailed my having to change my feelings. See, way of impeccability, we learn mood management. You
Yes.
learn that you're in charge of your feelings, not your feelings in charge of you. To illustrate my point, I told Don Juan the story of an old man of my culture, a very wealthy conservative lawyer who lived his life convinced that he upheld the truth. In the early 30s, with the advent of the New Deal, he found himself passionately involved in the political drama of that time. He was categorically sure that change was deleterious to the country, and out of devotion to his way of life and the conviction that he was right, he vowed to fight what he thought to be a political evil. But the tide of the time was too strong. It overpowered him. He struggled for 10 years against it, and in the political arena and in the realm of his personal life. Then the Second World War sealed his efforts into total defeat. I didn't read that exactly right, but all right. He struggled for 10 years against it in the political arena and in the realm of his personal life. Then the Second World War sealed his efforts into total defeat. His political and ideological downfall resulted in a profound bitterness. He became a self-exile for 25 years. When I met him, he was 84 years old and had come back to his hometown to spend his last years in a home for the aged. It seemed inconceivable to me that he had lived that long, considering the way he had squandered his life in bitterness and self-pity. Somehow he found my company amenable and wished to talk at great length. The last time I saw him, he had concluded our conversation with the following. I have had time to turn around and examine my life. The issues of my time are today only a story, not even an interesting one. Perhaps I threw away years of my life chasing something that never existed. I've had the feeling lately that I believed in something farcical. It wasn't worth my while. I think I know that. However, I can't retrieve the 40 years I've lost. Hierarchy of motivations. Make sure your prime motivation is one that is worthy and that your spirit believes is worthy. That's not a temporary one. See, he pursued the temporary motivation and the greater motivations, the higher motivations, moreness. There was no real moreness in what he did. Yes, he believed that it was politically so and this and that, but it didn't really affect his spirit. The comings and goings of politics, they've been going like this for centuries. There's nothing new, right? Yes, you can do it, but you need to have that be something that furthers the agenda of your spirit. If your spirit isn't enhanced by what you're doing, then it's going to ultimately end up like this, to be completely pointless. Right? So you can do both. You can have your political fights and whatever, but they need to serve the growth of your awareness and of your spirit. Yeah, that's it. Not be disconnected from that. Right? Not be the primary, and in your spirit sits there nothing, and then you look back and say, "Well, I wasted my time." This is way of impeccability, clarity of intent. See, there was no clarity of intent. They hadn't really even thought about it in that context. Right? So then you don't want to have that. So you must look at your actions and say, if these actions don't go the way I want them to do, will I regret it? If you're being impeccable, you will not regret it. Won't matter which way they turn out. Right? It's unimportant one way or the other. It's the intent with which you're doing it. Yes, the greater purpose. All right. So there's a lot to this. It's a big deal. I'm touching on it a bit, but over time, yes, I've gone into detail on these things, and I do so elsewhere. I have gone, but yeah, we're just going to touch on them, and let it build, let it build, let it build. I told Don Juan that my conflict arose from the doubts into which his words about controlled folly had thrown me. If nothing really matters, I said, upon becoming a person of knowledge, one would find oneself, perforce, as empty as my friend and in no better position. No, 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 Carlos, no. That's not so, Don Juan said cuttingly. Your friend is lonely because he will die without perceiving. In his life, he just grew old, and now he must have more self-pity than ever before. He feels he threw away 40 years because he was after victories and found only defeats. He'll never know that to be victorious and to be defeated are equal. See my point that I was making earlier? Don Juan is just confirming this. Yeah?
Yes.
If your agenda is a moreness of your spirit, enhancement and development of your awareness, doesn't matter what you do. If you are being impeccable, it matters not one iota whether there's a victory or a defeat. Your actions are the same. And the result is irrelevant. The impeccability is what counts. How things turn out is how things turn out. It's your impeccability that matters. That's why my core program and foundation to Moreness-Culture is called Way-Of-Impeccability. See, had that guy followed Way-Of-Impeccability, same with Carlos. Carlos, you there, be impeccable. How things turn out is irrelevant. Be impeccable, and then it wouldn't matter. Right? Very, very powerful. Very, very, very powerful. Yeah. Don Juan says, he'll never know that to be victorious and to be defeated are equal. So now you're afraid of me because I've told you that you're equal to everything else. You're being childish. Our lot as men is to learn, and one goes to knowledge as one goes to war. I've told you this countless times. One goes to knowledge or to war with fear, with respect, aware that one is going to war, and with absolute confidence in oneself. Put your trust in yourself, not in me. Before, Don used the word with complete assurance or self-assurance, right? So complete confidence in oneself. Same thing, right? This is very, very powerful. Yeah. I'm going to just add this to the quote file, even though we have it there before. It's good to have it
Yes.
again, right, Beena?
Yes.
Oh.
This always. And what
And
you were
this is
saying
a
about when
file we make.
yes,
What?
sorry, I was just saying that, okay, when you were saying, okay, I already said that, but not in this particular way. And this is the key
Right.
because everybody is aware of that what is good and what is not, mostly. But it's still nothing clicks, and then suddenly one simple thing clicks. And then you say, oh yes, so it is duh.
Exactly.
I was aware.
Exactly.
So we
Exactly.
need
The
different
magic of
different composition of
shifting.
words.
Yeah,
Exactly.
that's it. I learned this as a child. You're standing on the playground during break at school or whenever, and one kid's like, "Yeah, I don't get this. I don't understand this," and they're very earnest, right? And then all the other kids are like, "Well, think of it this way," and then, "No, I still don't get it. Think of it this way," and everybody comes up with a different way of thinking about it in a different way, and then all of a sudden, yes, and they click. It wasn't the last thing that mattered, which is a lot of people assume it was the last explanation. No, it was the all of them together. The brain starts putting it together, and you construct the greater whole from the sum of the perspectives. And I never said it in that way before, Beena. It's a very cool way of saying it. Yes. Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. 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 We construct, and that's a capital C construct. All right. I'll attribute that to Biela, right? We
Yes.
construct the greater
Yes.
whole from the sum of our multiple perspectives. Yes? Right, Beena?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Very, very good. Very good indeed. Very good. All right. So, this is the small disciplines, but they make a big difference, right? So I'm taking the time to take something that I understand very deeply, but never expressed in that exact particular way. And I add it to my quote file. Now, I could just
Yes.
have it as quote of my own quotes, but I like to attribute them to my various characters in the stories, and because the stories are profound exemplifications of Moreness cultures, the intent of why I wrote them. Well, that particular story, the Biala stories, right? That it's a fictional story, but it's an exemplification. I've written many and plenty non-fiction articles, hundreds, literally, thousands probably by now. Anyway, so but the discipline to actually just note it down, because otherwise it goes, right? And it's sometimes very short. Like if we look in that file, well, I don't know if the screen sharing is showing it. I think it shows it on TikTok, but it won't show it everywhere else. But when I look at that in my quote file there, earlier this morning, I said to Beena, in moreness, I will trust, because it came
Yes,
up, right? I
yes,
said, we need to trust in moreness. And then I just put it into quotable form. And then, it was what, maybe 5, 10 minutes when I finally got to my file, and then we'd forgotten temporarily. And it goes quickly, right? Yeah, so we have to pay attention to the stuff and do it now. Do it now. Do it now. Oh my gosh, my typing is horrible. Yeah, ambition without honesty is a road to disaster. Yeah, see, and that probably applies to Carlos's friend and to his own. Ambition without honesty is a road to disaster. We do things because, well, if you're really honest about it, well, do I really want to? No. Or you do dishonest things to satisfy your ambition, and that's just going nowhere. Right. All right. So Don Juan says, yeah, the last part he said, put your trust in yourself, not in me. Can you read yet, Beena, or not yet?
I can try. So I can try.
All right, but it's still Don Juan here, so don't worry about it. But we'll
Okay.
see in a moment. Right. Put your trust in yourself, not in me. And so you're afraid of the emptiness of your friend's life. But there's no emptiness in the life of a person of knowledge. I tell you, everything is full to the brim. Don Juan stood up and extended his arms as if feeling things in the air. Everything is full to the brim, and everything is equal. I'm not like your friend who just grew old. When I tell you that nothing matters, I don't mean it the way he does. For him, his struggle was not worth his while because he was defeated. For me, there is no victory or defeat or emptiness. Everything is full to the brim and everything is equal, and my struggle was worth my while. In order to become a person of knowledge, one must be a warrior, not a whimpering child. One must strive without giving up, without complaint, without flinching, until one perceives, only to realize then that nothing matters. Yeah? In other words, pursue moreness. This is the magic of moreness, right? It makes us realize that there is something beyond victory and defeat. This is moreness. Yes, Beena?
Yes, yes,
It's a very, very, very profound understanding of moreness. Yeah?
exactly, exactly.
Because for Don Juan, right, what he's saying is these are the usual stuff. But when you go
Yes,
past that, there's some, I mean, there's some value, obviously, and that's the moreness, right?
yes.
That's what moreness is. It's an ineffableness. But certainly, this is a very, very excellent exemplification of what moreness is. And when you live in moreness, like Don Juan says, your life is filled to the brim, overflowing. Yeah. This little passage affected me very profoundly when I first read it. Yeah, yeah, it's a very big deal. Yeah, that's very cool. Yeah. All right. If you can read, then you read, and then we'll do the dialogue again, right? So yeah, from Don Juan, right? Can you read,
Okay.
Sweetness?
Yes. Don Juan stirred the pot with a wooden spoon. The food was ready. He took the pot off the fire and placed it on an adobe rectangular block, which
Adobe,
he
Adobe.
adobe adobe rectangular block, which he had built against the wall and which he used as a shelf or a table. With his foot, he shoved two small boxes that served as comfortable chairs, especially if one sat with his back against the supporting beams of the wall. He signaled me to sit down and then he poured a bowl of soup. He smiled. His eyes were shining as if he were truly enjoying my presence. He pushed the bowl gently toward me. There was such a warmth and kindness in his gesture that it seemed to be an appeal to restore my trust in him. I felt idiotic. I tried to disrupt my mood by looking for my spoon, but I couldn't find it. The soup was too hot to be drunk directly from the bowl. And cooled off, while it cooled off, I asked Don Juan if controlled folly meant that a man of knowledge could not like anybody anymore. He stopped eating and laughed. You're too concerned with liking people.
It's me. You know what? Wait.
Yes, yes.
I'm laughing because I'm sharing Don Juan's amusement here. You're too concerned with liking people or being liked yourself. Hierarchy of motivations. This is your primary motivation or one of them. A person of knowledge likes, that's all. He likes whatever or whoever he wants, but uses his controlled folly to be unconcerned about it. The opposite of what you are doing right now. To like people or to be liked by people is not all one can do as a person. Yeah, think about that.
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
while you look there, I want to put this in the quote file. Yeah.
Okay. He stared at me for a moment with his head tilted a little to one side. Think about that, he said.
Can you see, or are you seeing the what happened? Keep going.
No, no, but it was your turn, so that's why I was ready. Okay, anyway.
Oh, I
There is
see.
one
Okay.
more.
Okay. Hang on. No. Think about that. That's Carlos is the next one.
Okay. There is one more thing I want to ask on one. You said that we need to look with our eyes to laugh. But I believe we laugh because we think. Take a blind man. He also laughs.
No, blind men don't laugh. Their bodies jerk a little with the ripple of laughter. They have never looked at the funny edge of the world and have to imagine it. Their laughter is not roaring.
We did not speak anymore. I had a sensation of well-being, of happiness. We ate in silence. The Don Juan began to laugh. I was using a dry twig to spoon the vegetables into my mouth. October 4th, 1968. At a certain moment today, I asked Don Juan if he minded talking a bit more about seeing or perceiving. He seemed to,
Perceiving.
yes, he seemed to do deliberate for an instant. Then he smiled and said that I was again involved in my usual routine, trying to talk instead of doing.
If you want to perceive, you have to let the smoke guide you. I won't talk about this anymore.
I was helping him clean some dry herbs. We worked in complete silence for a long time. When I'm forced into a prolonged silence, I always feel apprehensive, especially around Don Juan. At a given moment, I brought up a question to him in a sort of compulsive, almost flagrant outburst.
Belligerent.
Belligerent outburst. How does a man of knowledge exercise control folly when it comes to the death of a person he loves?
How does a person of knowledge? Yeah.
Sorry, I'm not getting it.
You said man. We are
Ah,
deliberately making
okay.
that effort
Yes.
to
Okay.
not
Okay. Okay.
default to this.
How does a person of knowledge exercise control folly when it comes to the death of a person he loves?
I love this. I love this. This is very important. And I have a program called Transition Through Change, and it's a double layered title. And it's learning to do things differently. So this is very powerful here. So let's hear what Don wants to say. I don't remember the specifically what he says, but it doesn't
Just
matter.
wait a
The
minute.
takeaway for me. Yeah.
Sorry to
Okay.
interrupt you, but look at the magic of having an intent. We didn't do anything
Yeah.
special, any ritual or anything, but we just set our intent, deliberately saying that, and of course, for the emphasis, we are repeating this, that we have an intent to connect with Don Juan. And what happened today?
Correct.
Coming here,
Correct.
we were actually discussing the same thing. And I had no
Yeah.
idea, zero idea that
Correct.
this
Correct.
question is going to come. But I had a
Yes. Yes. Beena
situation.
shared a story about somebody who had died
Yes,
relatively, yeah, well, this morning in
yes,
her world. Her world had died. Yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
And Syl shared this perspective, which was very, of course, very again
That,
very
that's how
unusual.
we came to the trust in Moreness story. Right. So the story
Exactly.
was in Beena's life, this father had a boy with special needs. And I think how old is the boy? Is fairly old already, no? It's like a
Yeah,
man
it's
already, yeah?
he's like 25, 26. Yes.
Yeah, right. And so and he has special needs and he doesn't like going inside the house, so they sit outside all the time. And from this, like one of the local vendors had come to know him. Anyway, so the father, I think a few days ago, last week, had a heart attack and died, right? But then the vendor took the boy in, and the vendor came to sit with the boy outside until like 4 o'clock in the morning, until he eventually went to bed and so on. And Beena's brother knows the vendor, the father, the boy. So and
Yes.
this led to that quote that I put in my quote file. In
Yes.
Moreness, I will trust, right? Or I trust in Moreness. Because I said to Beena, things happen all over the world. Always, there's some tragedy, there's some sadness, there's some joy, there's some profoundness. Somewhere there's always this going on. We can't always just only notice the negative. But in all of it, there's a moreness involved. And I went into detail a bit about how this particular, the death of the father is a mourners potentially for the son, depending on how the son deals with it, right? But there's a
Yes.
moreness involved. Sometimes we get pressured and leveraged because we're not learning, yeah, and we're stuck. Yeah? And sometimes you get the opportunity to learn easily, but you don't. Like the son is just stagnating. So now something radical needs to happen. And the father's love may have said, I need to do something profound, radical, to get the boy out of this. Yeah? Right, just for argument's sake. In other words, when we look at things from a mourner's perspective, it's like, wow, oh, I never thought of it in that way. I never thought that the father could be leaving as an act of love. Oh wow,
Exactly.
it's huge.
Exactly.
Huge. And Beena said too, the boy used to kind of argue with the father, but when the father had the heart attack, he was hugging and kissing him. He was exceedingly affectionate. Like he'd suddenly come to realize how much he actually loves the father and how important the father is to him. Yeah, never did before. See how tiny things are, and they're significant when you realize that this is profoundly changing within the boy, but that would never have happened without that circumstance. Huh? Or at least it hadn't up until then, when there'd been plenty of opportunity. So when we see this and when we see things going on, it's in moreness we trust. Now, moreness is taking what Don Juan is saying a little further, no? But we are going to look at this particularly in the context here of controlled folly, right? About how you deal with death. So let's see how Don Juan relates to this, right? So please continue, Beena.
Okay.
Top
Sorry,
of
I
the
missed
page.
that. Okay. Don Juan was taken aback by my question and looked at me quizzically. Take your grandson Lucio, I said. I would your act be controlled by folly at the time of his death?
Take my son Eulalio. That's a better example. He was crushed by
Wonderful.
rocks while working in the construction of the Pan American Highway. My acts toward him at that moment of his death were controlled folly. When I came down to the blasting area, he was almost dead, but his body was so strong that it kept on moving and kicking. I stood in front of him and told the boys in the road crew not to move him any more. They obeyed me and stood there surrounding my son, looking at his mangled body. I stood there too, but I did not look. I shifted my eyes so I would perceive his personal life disintegrating, expanding uncontrollably beyond its limits, like a fog of crystals. Because that is the way of life and death. Because that is the way life and death mix and expand. That is what I did at the time of my son's death. That's all one could ever do. And that is controlled folly. Had I looked at him, I would have watched him becoming immobile, and I would have felt a cry inside of me, because never again would I look at his fine figure pacing the earth. I perceived his death instead, and there was no sadness, no feeling. His death was equal to everything else.
Don Juan was quiet for a moment. He seemed to be sad, but then he smiled and tapped my head.
So you may say, when it comes to the death of a person I love, my controlled folly is to shift my eyes.
I thought about the people I love. I love myself in a terribly oppressive wave of self-pity and guilt. Lucky you, Don Juan, I said. You can shift your eyes, while I can only look. He found my statement funny and laughed.
Lucky, bull, it's hard work. All right, now I want to pause here.
Yes.
Transition, this concept of capital T transition, which goes hand in hand with the profound key conception of perspective shifting, hyphenated capital P, capital S. This
Mm.
perspective shifting enables us to achieve the same effect as Don Juan does from perceiving, but we perspective shift in order to see the greater whole. We've been taught that we need to be sad. Now, Don Juan is perceiving the energy directly, and he perceives this energy and the spirit moving, right? But also, if you were to be sad, you might perceive your energy clinging and holding on to that energy, trying to leave and go wherever it goes. And your sadness, which is a clinging, yes? You're holding
Mm.
that, you're holding your loved one back. To me, this is an inordinate crime. What a horrible thing to do to somebody you love. When you think of it in this way, you say, oh my goodness. Furthermore, who wants somebody else to be sad because they died? Only narcissists want others to be sad when they die. This is a whole complete superiority paradigm idea that we must be sad when people die. No, for me, it's the reverse. When somebody is now transitioning, right, I transition my relationship. I knew them physically, now I know them spiritually. They continue to live, they continue to be with me in my heart, in my soul, in my spirit. And I rejoice the fact that I had known them. Yes, we aren't promised one single second with anybody. Let me repeat that. We have never ever been promised one single second with anybody. Therefore, whatever we get is the greatest gift. So if Beena were to transition, I would be so incredibly thankful for every precious second that I have. And I wake up every day when I share to Beena, I share this joy that I take in the great magical marvelousness of the privilege, the profound joy, the great gift that I have of knowing Beena. How can I negate that by being sad? I cannot. I can only honor it, yes, by rejoicing and saying, man, what a gift I had to know Beena. Beena, you're going to live in my heart. And I will take that profound energy, the emphasis of the transition. Well, I don't want to talk about Beena like this kind of, whoever this was, right? I will take
Yes.
the profound emphasis of the transition, yes, and use that to lock into my brain the appreciation and the joy and the wonder and the marvelousness and all the goodness of knowing that person. Just because they have physically transitioned doesn't mean I stop knowing them. I just know them differently. The relationship has just changed. Yeah. It's not ended. That's the whole thing. We think it's ended and I've lost something. No, it hasn't. It's transitioned. You've gained something. You've gained something inside your heart, your spirit, your mind. Right. And the universe is saying, moreness. When you understand there's always moreness involved, and then you realize this. And you look for the moreness and you find the moreness. That's why moreness is such an incredible culture. That because of things like this, it enables you to realize that there is a moreness to life itself. And our trick is to find it. Yes. And when you realize the whole universe is set up so incredibly, brilliantly, awesomely, wonderfully, how can you possibly imagine that death is a negative? It has to be a positive. Has to be. There's no other way around it, because everything else is set up to be incredible and profound. And when you understand the underlying logic of it, which is the enhancement and development of awareness, the pursuit of oneness, in other words, then you realize that this too has to serve that purpose. Yeah. So changes everything, changes everything. So when we really come down to it, and that's what I'm saying, I'm taking what Don Juan has said and taking it all the way. As Don Juan says later on, you have to take things further. I am taking things further and have taken things further, much, much further, especially in this context, right? So we
Yes.
see this here, that yes, Don Juan has this, he perceives and he shifts, but in his non-shifting life, it's still an issue. He's still consumed with that superiority paradigm stuff and loss and all this. No, it's nonsense, right? So we can go beyond that without perceiving. Yes, it's very,
Yes.
very, very important, very big deal. All right, please
Yes.
continue here, Beena. From we
We
both
both
laughed.
laughed. After a long silence, I began probing him again, perhaps only to dispel my own sadness. If I have understood you correctly, then Don Juan, the only acts in the life of a man of person of knowledge
Oh,
which
oh,
are not controlled folly. Sorry.
no, 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 you
Yes.
got it right. Personal knowledge.
Okay. Okay. Person of knowledge which are not controlled folly are those he performs with their ally or with Mescalito. Isn't that right?
That's right.
Who's
My
still
ally
juggling?
and Mescalito. No, it's me. My ally and Mescalito are not on a par with us human beings. My controlled folly applies only to myself and to the acts I perform while in the company of my fellow people.
However, it's a logical possibility to think that a person of knowledge may also regard their act with their ally or with Nascalito as controlled folly. True? Sir, are you there?
Yeah, read the next line.
Okay. It is like he stared at me for a moment.
You're thinking again. A person of knowledge doesn't think. Therefore, he cannot encounter that possibility. Take me, for example. I say that my controlled folly applies to the acts I performed while in the company of my fellow people. I say that because I can perceive my fellow people. However, I cannot perceive through my ally, and that makes it incomprehensible to me. So how could I control my folly if I don't perceive through it? With my ally or with Mescalito, I am only a person who knows how to perceive and finds that they're baffled by what they perceive. A person who knows they'll never understand all that is around them. Take your case, for instance. It doesn't matter to me whether you become a person of knowledge or not. However, it matters to Mescalito. Obviously, it matters to him, or he wouldn't take so many steps to show his concern about you. I can notice his concern and I act toward it. Yet his reasons are incomprehensible to me. And this applies to the universe. Mescalito here is a actual, physical, real, particular, specific materialization of the universe. Very important what I'm saying. Right, Beena?
Yes. And
The
it makes
same attitude. Say again?
I'm saying that it makes everything sensible now.
Exactly, exactly. So now, when we look at Mescalito as a materialization, as a representation of the universe, we also understand that when you're living in attunement, we don't always have such a very clear and specific representation of the universe. We don't need it because it's everywhere around us. We just need to learn to listen. The universe is talking to us all the time, right? These are via anomalies and the language of the world, which is anomalies is the major language of the world. But there are other ways too, force of circumstance, etc. Right? When we learn to pay attention, we realize this is at a different level. And of course, in the same way, Don Juan says controlled folly applies to the nonsense of the world. But when the universe talks to you, You have no idea, it's incomprehensible, but you act. This is not something that you can say is controlled folly, and controlled folly doesn't apply, right? Because it's not folly. It's about controlling folly, but when things aren't folly, then you have to apply a different standard of behavior, correct? Controlled
Yes.
folly applies to the folly of the world. But when you say, well, not everything is folly in the world. The acts of the universe, of which Mescalito is a prime, profound example, right? It's a very particular materialization of it. This is something else entirely, right? And he says, I can notice his concern and I act towards it, yet his reasons are incomprehensible. Same with the universe, right? We can see the universe obviously has an interest here. What it is, I don't know. But when the universe calls on me to act, I know it's profound and I act. I know it is profound and I act. There's a moreness to it, in other words, and therefore I act. Duh. Right? It's a duh that there's a moreness to it. And how can you not respond, yeah, when you've been asked to do a moreness? I don't have to know what is going to happen. My brain probably can't handle it anyway. It's too complex. Yeah, I'm changing the whole world with my simple, silly action here. Or potentially, yes. All right, I might not, and the universe finds somebody else to do it. See? Okay. But still, yeah. Now, if you don't act on those things, then you end up with a life that's a bit empty. Yeah. And you end up living in folly. But this is the beauty and magic of moreness, and particularly way-of-impeccability, of which its culmination is attunement. That you end up with a life filled with moreness, and the moreness that is profound, that is really something extra, right? It's a very, very big deal. Yes, Beena? Oh, it jumps here. All right. So we jump here to a 6, yeah? To the next section, yeah, 6. Please continue reading, Beena.
It is just uploading. It is taking time for me.
Okay.
Just as we were getting into my car to start on a trip to central Mexico on October 5th, 1968, Don Juan stopped me.
I have told you before
He said with a serious expression.
that one should never reveal the name nor the whereabouts of a sorcerer. I believe you understand that you should never reveal my name nor the place where my body is. Now I am going to ask you to do the same with a friend of mine, a friend you will call Gennaro. I know it's probably Genaro or Genaro, but I call him Gennaro. That's always the way I've known him. And Gennaro, for me, is a very real entity. I've known Gennaro for more than all my adult life, right? And so he's a very deep character to me, like Don Juan, right? He's a very big part of me. So I call him Gennaro. This is my name for him. If I were to meet him now, I'd call him Gennaro, and Gennaro, knowing Gennaro, would be quite happy with us, right? We are going to his house. We will spend some time there. Read, Beena?
Yes, going to. Okay. I assumed Don Juan that I had never betrayed his
I
confidence.
assured.
I assured Don Juan that I had never betrayed his confidence.
I know that.
He said without changing his serious expression.
Yet I am concerned with your becoming thoughtless. Mm.
Protested, and Don Juan said his aim was only to remind me that every time one was careless in matters of sorcery, one was playing with an imminent and senseless death that could be endured by being thoughtful in a way.
We will not touch upon this matter any longer. Once we leave my house, we will not mention Gennaro, nor will we think about him. I want you to put your thoughts in order now. When you meet him, you must be clear and have no doubts in your mind. Beena, where you, Beena? Did Beena drop off? Oh, okay. What kind of doubts are you referring to, Don Juan? Any kinds of doubts, whatever. When you meet him, you ought to be crystal clear. He will perceive you. His strange admonitions made me very apprehensive. I mentioned that perhaps I should not meet his friend at all, but only drive to the vicinity of his friend's house and leave him there. What I've told you was only a precaution. You've met one sorcerer already, Vicente, and he nearly killed you. Watch out this time. After we arrived in central Mexico, it took us 2 days to walk from where I left my car to his friend's house. Wow, it was a long walk, 2 days. A little shack perched on the side of a mountain. Don Juan's friend was at the door, as if he had been waiting for us. I recognized him immediately. I had already made his acquaintance, although very briefly, when I brought my book to Don Juan. I had not really looked at him at that time, except in a glancing fashion. So I had had the feeling he was as old as Don Juan. As he stood at the door to his house, however, I noticed that he was definitely younger. He was perhaps in his early 60s. He was shorter than Don Juan and slimmer, very dark and wiry. His hair was thick and graying and a bit long. It ran over his ears and forehead. His face was round and hard. A very prominent nose made him look like a bird of prey with small dark eyes. He talked to Don Juan first. Don Juan nodded affirmatively. They conversed briefly. They were not speaking Spanish, so I did not understand what they were saying. Then Don Gennaro turned to me. "You're welcome to my humble little shack," he said apologetically in Spanish. His words were a polite formula I had heard before in various rural areas of Mexico. Yet as he said the words, he laughed joyously for no overt reason, and I knew he was exercising his controlled folly. Brilliant, wonderful Gennaro. He did not care in the least that his house was a shack. I liked Don Gennaro very much, yes. For the next 2 days, we went into the mountains to connect plants. Don Juan, Don Gennaro, and I left each day at the crack of dawn. The two old men went together to some specific but unidentified part of the mountains and left me alone in one area of the woods. I had an exquisite feeling there. I did not notice the passage of time, nor was I apprehensive at staying alone. The extraordinary experience I had both days was an uncanny capacity to concentrate on the delicate tasks of finding the specific plants Don Juan had entrusted me to collect. We returned to the house in the late afternoon, and both days I was so tired that I fell asleep immediately. The third day, however, was different. The three of us worked together, and Don Juan asked Don Gennaro to teach me how to select certain plants. We returned around noon, and the two old men sat for hours in front of the house in complete silence, as if they were in a state of trance, yet they were not asleep. I walked around them a couple of times. Don Juan followed my movements with his eyes, and so did Don Gennaro. "You must talk to the plants before you pick them," Don Juan said. He dropped his words casually and repeated the statement 3 times, as if to catch my attention. Nobody had said a word until he spoke. In order to perceive the plants, you must talk to them personally. You must get to know them individually. Then the plants can tell you anything you care to know about them. Well, it was late in the afternoon. Don Juan was sitting on a flat rock facing the western mountains. Don Gennaro was sitting by him on a straw mat with his face toward the north. Don Juan had told me the first day we were there that those were their positions and that I had to sit on the ground at any place opposite to them. He added that while we sat in those positions, I had to keep my face towards the southeast and look at them only in brief glances. "Yes, that's the way it is with plants, isn't it?" Don Juan said and turned to Don Gennaro, who agreed with an affirmative gesture. I told him that the reason I had not followed his instructions was because I felt a little stupid talking to plants. "You fail to understand that the sorcerer is not joking. When a sorcerer attempts to perceive, he attempts to gain power. When a sorcerer attempts to perceive, they attempt to gain power." Yeah, very important this, right? Now, when we're talking about power here, we're going to see later, this is not the power of superiority paradigm power, which is the power of dominance and hierarchy. No, this is actual, raw, real power. which is energy that you can use. Yes, that's what power is. Energy put to use, and usable energy is power. Don Gennaro was staring at me. I was taking notes, and that seemed to baffle him. He smiled at me, shook his head, and said something to Don Juan. Don Juan shrugged his shoulders. To see me writing must have been quite odd for Don Gennaro. Don Juan was, I suppose, habituated to my taking notes, and the fact that I wrote while he spoke was no longer odd to him. He could carry on talking without appearing to notice my acts. Don Gennaro, however, kept on laughing, and I had to stop writing in order not to disrupt the mood of the conversation. Don Juan affirmed again that the sorcerer's acts were not to be taken as jokes, because a sorcerer played with death at every turn of the way. Then he proceeded to relate to Don Gennaro the story of how one night I had looked at the lights of death following me during one of our trips. The story proved to be utterly funny. Don Gennaro rolled on the ground laughing. That's what I love about Don Gennaro. He just he has a magical ability to see the funny side of everything. Don Juan apologized to me and said that his friend was given to explosions of laughter. I glanced at Don Gennaro, who I thought was still rolling on the ground, and saw him performing a most unusual act. He was standing on his head without the aid of his arms or hands, and his legs were crossed as if he was sitting. Holy moly! The sight was so incongruous that it made me jump. When I realized he was doing something almost impossible from the point of view of body mechanics, he had gone back again to a normal sitting position. Don Juan, however, seemed to be cognizant of what was involved and celebrated Don Gennaro's performance with roaring laughter. Don Gennaro seemed to have noticed my confusion. He clapped his hands a couple of times and rolled on the ground again. Apparently, he wanted me to watch him. What at first appeared to be rolling on the ground was actually leaning over in a sitting position and touching the ground with his head. He seemingly attained his illogical posture by gaining momentum, leaning over several times until the inertia carried his body to a vertical stand, so that for an instant he sat on his head. Carlos hasn't yet realized that Don Gennaro is doing something incredibly profound, but at the same time, he's leveraging Carlos's weirdness. And his statement is a physical representation, a Moreness representation, right? A perceiving, he's doing something in a very different reality, but he's leveraging the Carlos's folly as the leveraging point, right? So he's making a metaphoric statement as well as demonstrating something profound to Carlos, right? He's enabling Carlos to perceive, even if more or less, but he's leveraging this. And Carlos isn't quite getting this, that he's sitting on his head, in other words. He's inverted, he's upside down, he's topsy-turvy. When their laughter subsided, Don Juan continued talking. I think I'm going to end it here because I want to reread this tomorrow with Beena. Right? This is important. This is an important point here, and it's an important incident as well. So I'm going to leave it there for today. I'm going to leave it there for today. Brilliant, brilliant, brilliant. Let me just check and see everybody. Say hello. Yes. Hello for those who joined us, Dushkatari and WD. Just love it, who joined us on Instagram. So very cool. Hello, Dushkatari. Hello, hello, hello. How are you, wonderful person? Always a joy when you join. This gives me great joy, great joy, great joy. So wonderful, wonderful. Wow, very cool, Dusko. And everybody else too, right? It's just excellent stuff, excellent stuff. All right, brilliant, brilliant, brilliant. See if there were any chats. Nope, nothing in Facebook. All right, so we'll see you tomorrow, and we'll continue tomorrow. Or maybe not. Mondays sometimes are very busy, and we don't always get the opportunity to come, but tomorrow seems to be fairly open if I can think of stuff, so maybe we should be here. Hopefully we try and be here every day except Saturdays, but sometimes life has its own agenda. However, doesn't mean we don't try. We set the intent, yeah, but stuff happens and we adapt as appropriate, of course, as always. Appropriateness is the guiding core root conception on which everything else follows, right? So that Beena said earlier in the introduction, what am I doing? Capital D doing. And you think, is this appropriate? Is this appropriate in every single context? Then you're on the right track. Okay, I'll leave it on that point. Yes, on this conception of appropriateness. and can catch you all tomorrow. All right. Bye-bye, everybody. Bye-bye, bye-bye, bye-bye. Let me just end all these things. I got 3 different things to end, so it can be a bit tricky sometimes. Yeah. Okay. It's going to end on its own, it seems. Come on now. I want to end it. Don't end it of your own accord, yeah. Oh well. TikTok is a bit weird. I gotta tell you, it's a bit weird. I don't quite understand it sometimes. It's like it says detected your inactivity, but I was active all the time. Like, man, what are you doing? Oh, come on. All right. Anyway.